The Boston Celtics and the Charlotte Hornets have finally figured out how to get Gordon Hayward out of Boston and into Charlotte. It is a sign and trade deal, something that we didn't think was going to happen. We all kind of expected Gordon Hayward just sign outright with the Charlotte Hornets, but then that didn't happen. So he agrees to the 4-year, $120 million deal. And then all of a sudden there's talk that it's a sign-in trade and that the Pacers that the Hornets are potentially going to send something back to the Celtics, like a Cody Zeller. Maybe they'll include the Nicholas Batum contract. And then all of a sudden it was, no, it's just going to be a sign-in trade with draft picks and a trade exception will be figured out. And that's what ended up happening. And so here's the exact trade. Here are all the details that you need to know about how Gordon Hayward became a Charlotte Hornet. So Hayward goes to the Hornets for not one, but 2 second-round picks, one in 2023 and one in 2024. No protections on those picks as far as I've seen. Meanwhile, the Boston Celtics receive a conditional second-round pick, which probably will not even go to the Boston Celtics because it's conditional, which means if this happens, then they'll get the pick, and a $28 million trade exception. Now, you kind of look at this and you're like, okay, why did the Celtics give up the player plus 2 picks and then basically not even get a pick back? What was that all about? Well, that trade exception, I'm going to break it down here more in just a minute, but I want you guys to make a prediction or tell me what you guys think. Who should the Celtics use that trade exception on? Because they can use it on anybody they want now for up to $28 million. That's a lot of good talent that they could acquire for $28 million. And if you don't know what a trade exception is, I'm going to explain it here in just a moment, so stay tuned. But while you're at it, if you do know what it is, go ahead and comment down below one player they should use it on before, really, the NBA trade deadline. Now, for the Hornets, this gives them really an established veteran in this starting 5 of some really, young talent. LaMelo Ball, arguably the Rookie of the Year favorite. I think they start Devontae Graham next to him, potentially Terry Rozier. I think you can make either one of those 2 guards a 6-man. Hayward is definitely starting at the 3. You go P.J. Washington at the 4. Cody Zeller for now is at the 5, but I could see Charlotte looking to move him before the deadline. They brought back Bismack Biyombo. They just signed Vernon Carey Jr. to a 4-year deal, which was actually pretty surprising. The most guaranteed money for any second-round pick this year. Cody Martin played some solid minutes for this team, 48 games played for the Hornets. He'll come off the bench. His brother Caleb Martin is also back there, but he's a little further down the rotation. Malik Monk is still a young and up-and-coming guy, and like I said, it can either be Terry Rozier or Devontae Graham, but you go back to what Boston did and why they did the sign-and trade was because of that trade exception. It wasn't about the draft picks. They didn't care about the draft picks. What they cared about was making the biggest trade exception in NBA history. Now, how trade exceptions come to be, I still do not know because NBA cap is so freaking weird. But what I do know is that the Celtics have now created this trade exception, which allows them to trade for any player worth $28 million and not have to match that salary. And you're like, okay, break it down. Explain it to me like I'm 5 years old. Okay, so basically, if the Celtics traded for a guy that's making $15 million, they could just absorb him into their cap space. They wouldn't have to worry about sending back any kind of player worth $15 million. So let's say they do want to go out and get Myles Turner before the trade deadline. Guess what? They can do that by just sending away a draft pick, by sending away a rookie contract, by sending away, literally anything without having to worry about matching that salary. Or they could use it not just on one player, but multiple players. Let's say they went out and they traded for, 2 guys making $10 million and a guy making $8 million. They could do that and just eat that trade exception up. So, again, this trade had nothing to do with the picks. It had nothing to do with getting off of Gordon Hayward's salary. It had everything to do with creating that trade exception, and now they have that. Danny Ainge has that in his back pocket. And if you want to know what they end up doing with that trade exception or really what they do throughout the season, now that we're getting there with training camp coming up, you're going to want to make sure you subscribe to youtube.com/CelticsTV if you're a die-hard Celtics fan. If you're just a casual Celtics fan too, that's fine. If you're a casual NBA fan, guess what? We got videos for you as well. We're going to break down anything and all things Celtics at youtube.com/CelticsTV. Now, one more piece of news here for the Boston Celtics is that they have hired a new coach. No, they're not replacing Brad Stevens, but Evan Turner has signed on to be an assistant coach for the Boston Celtics alongside Brad Stevens. Now, interestingly enough, Evan Turner was still playing basketball just last year. I think his back problems really started to flare up, and he's really been hampered from that. So now he's turning to coaching where he will help with the player development stuff in Boston. Remember, this guy was already with the Celtics for 2 years, in 2014 and 2016, and now he's joining Brad Stevens' staff as an assistant head coach.